Okay, so for the first piece for today, I'm going to have a look at Kony 2012 because I think it's one that a lot of you haven't done, and I'll try and put more emphasis today on the intended effect. Okay, so in some jungle in Africa, a mass murderer called Kony is shattered. A few million people on Facebook have unfriended him. Now, it's very important when you look at this opening paragraph that you realize that it's sarcastic. Okay, because a mass murderer in some jungle in Africa probably wouldn't even have Facebook. Now, the intended effect of sarcasm here is because you're stating the extreme opposite of what you actually think, you are ridiculing the opposition's point of view. So a reader is meant to read this part here and realize how silly it sounds. So words that make you realize that it's really exaggerated is shattered, and that notion of having unfriended him, since it's very unlikely that he would have Facebook. Now, if we just jump over to the accompanying cartoon by Brolman here, you can see the little title here, Ugandan warlord Kony responds to the internet campaign against him, and he's made this giant lol out of skulls. Now, this shows his complete disdain for the internet campaign. The fact that he's really laughing at them, and not only that, that the figure he's making here is out of human skulls, which means that this campaign against him is having absolutely no impact. So readers are meant to look at this, and obviously they're going to be amused, but underneath the amusement there is a very serious message, which is that there are going to be millions of deaths, and what they're doing is ineffective. This is enforced over here. This would obviously be Kony saying, I like this internet language, and it looks like he has one of his child soldiers here. Um, and his facial expression seems to be one of he's kind of sort of nonchalant. He's really unaffected. So readers are meant to recognize the futility of their efforts and see that they're really being laughed at, and as no one wants to be laughed at, they will be unlikely to continue this path. Now, and millions who'd never heard of Joseph Kony can relax, having advertised their goodness by clicking the share button on YouTube. Now, there's this notion here of advertised their goodness. So it seems that really what these young people are trying to do is not actually help the cause overseas, but make themselves look good. So this would evoke a sense of guilt in the readers, making them think that perhaps they're getting them to question their motivations and think that perhaps their motivations are very self-interested rather than this altruistic desire to help others. So therefore, they might consider a method of helping that doesn't advertise their goodness, perhaps donating something, privately, so that they know that they're not doing it to benefit themselves. Wow, and I thought the live Earth concerts, bopping to top bands while screaming at governments to save the planet, couldn't be topped. Again, this is sarcasm. Um, and we have this sort of sense of imagery being created here. So this crowd of people rocking out to, music, screaming, save the planet. Obviously, we picture that image and think, well, that again isn't going to be very effective. So we view those groups as being quite silly, and we can see the parallel with our own actions of sharing videos on YouTube. Again, we've got a repetition of things like no sweat moralizing thing. This is like a recurring idea of things being really easy. So that gives the readers this sense that they're not really putting in much effort at all. And this might encourage them to do something a bit real, something that does involve a bit more hard work and sweat. Now, the word over here, slick, when talking about the production, kind of suggests that it's a bit overproduced, a bit too highly edited. It's not really authentic. And so readers are meant to kind of view the video not so much for its content, but for how it's produced, and realize that it's all a bit too smooth. So it's like those kind of car dealers. They slick their hair back with the gel and make themselves look, really smooth and everything. and it's to conceal the fact that there's something dodgy underneath. So when we hear something like flick, we start to feel like it's sort of a dubious campaign, and maybe they're after our money. Where are we? So here, obviously, he does acknowledge that Kony is vermin. So at this stage of the article, we might, start to think, oh, does he support Kony? But he does say here, he is vermin. He has kidnapped children, used them as soldiers and prostitutes, all that sort of thing. So, you know, the reader can then see that Andrew Bolt recognises the seriousness of this issue. So it's not that Andrew Bolt is anti charity, he's just anti easy, no sweat, moralising the advertiser's goodness. So this reassures the reader. They know that Andrew Bolt does have, the right intentions. So then he goes down and has a look at the video itself. And he has several direct quotes from the video. I'd probably skip through the quotes and again look at this. One click and Kony's gone. The world remade, and they don't even have to leave the house. Phrases I look at is one click and Kony's gone, or they don't even have to leave the house. This sort of language reminds me of those advertisements on television that's you know advertising fitness equipment, and they say, you can do it in the comfort of your own bedroom, all that kind of thing. And there is a certain stigma that surrounds these fitness equipment sales, this notion that they don't actually work. So I think that through his choice of language, Bolt is trying to parallel that language to capitalize on that stigma in the reader's minds and have them think, oh, well, that doesn't sound right. We can stop a warlord without even leaving the house. So, hopefully at this point in the article, Bolt has the reader sort of sharing his sense of cynicism and doubt. Now, this is interesting here. Kony isn't where you'd think or the threat you'd think. Okay, so here what we're doing is we're creating what they call in teaching terms a cognitive conflict. So, these readers, they've been watching this video and they've been indoctrinated with certain beliefs about Kony, and we're creating a conflict in their mind by suggesting to them, well, actually, he may not even be where you think or the threat you'd think. So, again, this is really raising their curiosity, but by creating a cognitive conflict in their minds are now open to some new information. Um, and then they may be quite surprised when he gives them the fact that he was chased out of Uganda. Now, at this point, we might be thinking, what does Andrew Bolt know really about Kony? So that's why we have this quote here from Dr. Beatrice Mapora. And she says herself, there has not been a single soul from the LRA here since 2006. But probably the phrase I'd quote in my analysis is Dr. Beatrice Mapora. And I would be saying that, like I said a moment ago, people would be questioning what does Bolt know about this issue? And therefore, by quoting a doctor who is working and living in that region, that builds credibility for this new and new information. Okay. So here we have a couple of questions. Bolt is obviously now actually asking the questions that readers are probably starting to be thinking, which is, okay, so what's with this film then if these things aren't actually true? And we've got here the warning squeaks of an ego being stroked. So here we have some sort of interesting language that it's almost onomatopoeia, but it isn't. Um, it's I'd say you could probably go with metaphorical because you can't actually stroke an ego, but it's playing with that cliche. Um, and we get down to talking about the person who made the film, which is Russell. And we've got words here like adorable, daddy, and things like that. And this kind of creates a very sort of snide tone towards Russell. Um, and we're meant to kind of view this film as being a bit sort of childish and simplistic. Okay. Notice the quote down here as music swells. So again, that relates back to this very overproduced, slick production techniques that when something emotional happens, the music starts to rise. Now, this wouldn't happen in the real world. You know, if something dramatic happens, you don't all of a sudden hear an orchestra playing dramatic music in the background. So we can see, or readers will start to get this idea that this film is like a movie. It's not like reality, and therefore they're going to be less likely to trust it and find it to be believable. Now here he starts to lose the reader's trust for the Kony campaign, tapping into their sort of hip pocket nerve, showing them that just 3 million out of a $10 million worth of funds has been spent on Central African projects. So this will sort of outrage the readers, wondering where the money is gone, and feel again, like with the language indicated earlier, that this is a bit of a scam. Okay, now, so we've had a lot of language that sort of connoted fakery, scams, and things like that, and no sweat moralizing. So now we're going to have a look at real charity. And he has an anecdote of the Lithuanian priest Father Herman Schultz. Um, and the really important word to have a look at. Obviously, the anecdote gives you a real example. He's been involved. It's given this personal angle, and so that again is credibility building for the reader. They can actually learn from the example of somebody who has made a real difference. Um, and this is important. This sweat. Okay, so earlier in the piece we had the no sweat moralizing, and here we had sweat. So now we start to talk about real action. This also, in a way, appeals to the reader's sense of logic because how can you achieve anything without actual action? Um, and repetition of things like real. Okay, so here we have some juxtaposing, comparing raising awareness to giving help, advertising goodness as opposed to giving money to achieve it. Okay, by positioning these things next to each other, it makes it really obvious to the reader which is the best option. Okay, and then we have some repetition. If you can focus just on the words we have, we have, we have. Um, and again, this is showing a sense of contrast. So um, we have millions switching off lights for an hour, thinking they're saving the planet. We have 250,000 people walk over a bridge, thinking they've helped Aborigines. So I think this word I'd really focus on is thinking, because that is implying that while they think they're saving the planet, they're not really. And again, this brings forward that message that's been going the whole way along, that it is ineffectual. It's not having an effect, these actions. So overall, Bolt is trying to say that you need real action. So by having this word thinking, and the implication that it's not actually happening, it leads the readers to making a realization that if they want to make a real change, they have to do real action. Okay, I hope that's been helpful.